Let's talk Jinx. A weekly Jinx video we do every Wednesday about anything to do with Jinx, as well as this video acting as a weekly discussion thread on the Jinx subreddit, our League of Jinx. Make sure to go check that out. We're going to talk about patch 10.14 for today's topic, so let's jump right into it. There were no changes to Jinx directly on this patch, but there were changes to other AD carries that might affect Jinx's matchups in the laning phase. The first one being Ezreal actually, with the E cooldown being increased. He right now is a bit too safe and a bit too slippery, and it's kind of a bad thing across all phases of the game. That's a thing for all phases of the game. So what they're doing here is they're making the cooldown increased on that at all phases of the game, which includes laning phase. Now granted, I think this would only really matter with the Jinx Ezreal matchup if you have a more hardened gauge or CC support that can lock him down. They're gonna have like an extra 3 seconds just out the gates to try and lock him down a bit more in between his arcane shifts, to try and go in with the combo with the flame choppers and stuff like that. Not really a big drastic change. Ezreal himself might feel this more than a matchup would feel this, right? Like this is more of a Ezreal specific change, that if this was more of a Let's Talk Ezreal video series, it might matter a bit more here. But in terms of if you're playing as Jinx against Ezreal, the lane phase is for the most part going to be the same depending on the support champion that you have. Which, with that being said, Alistar did get the cooldown decreased, so if you see him a bit more and the pulverize more options, right, that, for example, could be an example of an actual significant change in the Jinx Ezreal matchup if you have an Alistar, because suddenly he's going to have pulverize for 2 more seconds more than usual, because that's how the cooldown's been decreased, and Ezreal's going to have 3 seconds less on the cooldown for his arcane shift, for a total of 5 seconds to play around with that ability. So that could actually be an overall neat thing when you start combining different parts with it. But individually, the Jinx Ezreal matchup does not change too much because of this change. Pike is getting some changes because they kind of want him back in the support role. That's a very oversimplistic version of it. The base magic resist growth and armor growth is being decreased. The Q cost is decreased but now scales. The cooldown decreased early. The base damage has been increased. The W bonus movement speed now costs at all ranks, and the E base damage is being increased. That's a lot of stuff being said to basically say they kind of want him back in the bottom lane by doing things that would affect his mid lane more significantly and also possibly buff his bottom lane. I know people have different opinions on like playing with a Pike, especially if you're playing as Jinx and stuff like that, not really maybe a lane bully, but these changes might be okay if for nothing else, because if you're going to be seeing him more, he might actually be in a better spot to play around with. So for example, with the Bone Skewer being on a lower cost, he might be able to get more picks, and then if you try and time again, it's always about the flame chompers with these hard engaged supports. If you follow that up, maybe the whole combo will mean, especially if he gets the kill, you still get the gold, because that's the way his ultimate works. So even if he's getting the kills off of it, it's still good. I'm not saying play support Jinx, I'm saying play support Jinx. I'm saying you might be able to work with something there. Your ultimate has to execute on it, his ultimate has to execute on it, whoever fires off early, the other one can still pick up the kill. There could be like potential there for this to actually be pretty decent if you're gonna have to deal with it. So just something to keep in mind basically is what I'm saying. Varus, however you want to pronounce it. The Q maximum bonus damage ratio now scales. The E base damage has been decreased early. So, with that being said, what this means in the laning phase is that the maximum bonus damage ratio on his Q was 150% total damage and is now down to 125% and only scales up to 145% at max ranks. So, and also people don't necessarily take this first. They usually take like the hail of arrows first, which is also getting changed. It's down 20 damage at rank 1. So it means in the early lane phase, where he's probably going to be bullying you the most, you probably just have your minigun, you don't even have level 2 yet, right? And even at level 2, he has significantly less damage across the board in his combo to try and poke you down out of lane, especially if he's going like lethality build early or something like that. So it means you have a little bit extra time on the clock to play around with in a Varus Jinx lane. As with all these changes, the preference I'm seeing here though is it's really going to come down to what support that you have more so than the power that you have, because again, Jinx didn't really get any individual changes, so the changes for her aren't really there to kind of maybe push this in a different direction or flop it and flip the table, if you will, if it was going the other way. Like with the Ezreal, like we talked about, there's like a bunch of moving parts that if they come together will be really good, but by themselves aren't necessarily all that high. It's not high, right? So that being said, if Jinx were to get some changes with these going forward, these matchups would be somewhat significant. Like looking at patch 10.15, if Jinx got a little bit of love and these changes are already kind of a thing now going into patch 10.14, you could see these matchups kind of maybe swing a bit more in Jinx's favor. I don't know what necessarily they do for Jinx in that regard. Some people have talked about they maybe want to see some rework stuff, or they just want to see some love whatsoever, even if it's quality of life stuff at this point. We're gonna have to see, but that doesn't really change all that much. Honorable mention to Zed, not because he'll be being played in the bottom lane, but Zed is something that frustrates a lot of people, AD carries included. The W missile speeds being increased and the cooldowns being decreased early. But the reason I bring this up is because one thing about Zed, especially for newer players, if you don't know this, when he ults you, he always appears behind you. So as long as, I don't want to say like hold still, but he is going to be behind you if you're going to try and use the flame choppers to try and snare him when he comes out of initially using the death mark. So that's something that some players don't necessarily know about the champion, especially if you don't like a champion, you don't do research about the champion necessarily, and that's, you know, that's fine. Or if you're just new to the game, you haven't played enough yet and played enough games against Zed as Jinx, you might not know that, but he will always appear right behind you. It's the whole meme, I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, but the whole Omae wa mo shinryu nani? That meme, it's literally that. He will be right behind you, and if you can get CC either from you or if you have a support near you, plan accordingly, because that will be a thing. And because Zed is getting buffed, I imagine more people will just be wanting to play Zed. So, with that being said, we're going to be skipping on the AD carry tier list this week, only because I feel like I need to kind of rework that idea to make it better for both the subreddit, just in general as a video idea, and stuff like that. Don't necessarily want to drag this video on a bit too much, but if I could offer my 2 cents, with the AD carry changes, we see like Varus stuff being nerfed, we see Ezreal maybe getting nerfed and stuff like that. In pro play, Aphelios and stuff like that is more of an issue. We made a joking video about the Victorious Aphelios skin, if you want to go check that out on the other channel. But overall, in pro play, I don't necessarily know how much effective this will be, because you do still see things like Callista and Ashe and whatnot, and I'm not saying they're overpowered in pro play, but I think there's maybe a bit more of a variety even in pro play, regardless of Aphelios being powerful there, than there is in solo queue. In solo queue, like if you want to play Aphelios, play Aphelios. He escaped nerfs this patch. If you're an Aphelios main, go ham, celebrate. If you're a Jinx main this patch, she didn't get buffs, but she probably won't get worse, because a lot of the AD carries that were hit were AD carries that were kind of getting a little bit to be outliner AD carries that might be keeping her down a little bit, if that makes sense. Essentially, the concept is, if an AD carry is powerful, like let's say Draven was really powerful, other AD carries might be weak in comparison, that nerfing that AD carry might make those other AD carries stronger in comparison, because they weren't, you know, buffed, but they weren't nerfed, but the thing that was keeping them down was nerfed. The bottle cap was taken off the bottle, the water kind of flow out the water bottle, if you will, if that analogy makes sense. It doesn't. I'm rambling, so I'm going to end the video by saying in the comments though, comment with what AD carries you think will be good, how good you think Jinx is, and can Jinx be good on this patch. But that's all for this video from me. So thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification, the actual subscribe button. But I don't know what video will be next, because life can have a lot of kinks. So until this time, take care. GG, get jinxed. Thank you for watching, and enjoy pizza responsibly.